Hello everyone, hi! So today I'm just gonna make a quick video talking about how I read in foreign languages. These tips apply to any language you might be learning at the moment, but I'm gonna take French as my example since that's the language that I'm currently trying to strengthen my reading muscles in. I love French literature, I love the French language, but it's not my mother tongue, so it's very effortful for me to read in French. And I'm always trying to challenge myself on the one hand, but also not overwhelming myself on the other hand. So this video is basically about how to strike that balance. I'll also add in a book recommendation at every point in case you're also starting to read in French and you're on the lookout for some books to start with. And lastly, before we get into the points, I have recently released a course on French literature where I guide you through what I think are the 20 most important classics of French literature. If you're interested, I'll link it in the description box below. And I'm Maria. Did I already say that? I study literature and I make these videos. I guess you can see the rest for yourself. Okay, so let's get the first and most obvious tip out of the way. Choose short books. If you speak a foreign language, you know that feeling of accomplishment of reading an actual entire book for the first time in a language that you've been learning. And choosing a slim book that you can finish in a relatively short amount of time will just give you that feeling of accomplishment way earlier. For me, that book was Bonjour, Tristesse by Françoise Sagan. I'm pretty sure this is the first book I've ever read entirely in French, front to back on my own. It's short, sweet. This edition has 150 pages, but they're very, very small pages with big print. It's also such a perfect classic summer read. This book really gives me Lolita vibes, but in a different way. It's about the complicated relationship between a girl and her father. It's about jealousy and decadence and hedonism, and basically the question of which path you choose in life. So this book has gotten me over the hump of, yeah, I can read in French now. Tip number 2 is to listen to audiobooks while reading. Having someone read out loud while you're reading on the page is such an excellent way to stay engaged in the story. I always find that it really carries me through a book to listen to someone else reading it out loud. And it just dials down the amount of focus I need significantly. Oh my gosh, the spider. What are you doing? Yeah, come. Yeah. Yeah. Woo! So, the book that really opened my eyes to how great audiobooks are is Ernaux's L'autre fille, the other girl. This is the book. It also checks the first box of being very, very slim. You can probably get through that within a couple of hours. But I also have the audio CD. I loved listening to this in the car when I still had a car, and I had to drive to my job every day. And when I still had a job, when I still had a car and a job, I loved putting this on, and it was so soothing. I mean, if you're learning a foreign language, you probably love that language and the way it sounds, and to just have that on in the background while driving was, I don't know, it was somehow calming me down. And this is narrated by the author, so Ernaux herself reads the audiobook out loud. She has a beautiful and clear voice, and obviously there's something special about hearing the author read her own book. She has a lot of short books in general. I talked about Ernaux in my last video actually about where to start with French literature, so if you're more interested in her, I would definitely check out that video. She has a lot of great short books to get started with. So anyways, when I'm not listening in the car, I like to just sit down with the book and read it and have the audiobook on in the background. And what I really love about this method is that at the same time that I'm reading, I'm also learning how to pronounce those very words that I'm reading. which is such a big deal, especially in French, right? Pronunciation. Tip number 3. Read books that you already know. When reading in a foreign language, there's already so much that you have to pay attention to that it's really nice when you don't also have to keep track of the plot. I have a lot of books that I'll happily reread because they don't rely on plot twists or the thrill to stay interesting. And especially books that are originally in French and that I've already read in German or English. Like the prospect of being able to finally read them in the original language, to finally read and understand the words that the author has actually written, that's really exciting to me. To me, Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert was one such example. This is the German translation by Elisabeth Edel, which is fantastic. If you speak German, you know, that's the translation to get for sure. But yeah, I read it in German, and then when I moved to Paris, I got the French version, and with an audiobook actually in the background, I made my way through it. I find that reading books that I already know also keeps me from making the detrimental mistake of feeling like I have to look up every word that I don't understand. I don't know about you, but that interrupts my reading flow way too much. And it's often that kind of perfectionism of feeling like I need to make sure I track absolutely everything that actually prevents me from just reading. I've really tried to train myself to understand that comprehension doesn't rely on vocabulary. So I invite you to break that link as well. Tip number 4, read exciting books like romance or detective stories. Unlike classics, those books often use a much more easy to understand language, have more exciting plot twists to keep you on the edge of your seat. And I remember what got me through my first Norwegian book was getting one of those Scandinavian detective thrillers. I'm not usually into super exciting books or detective stories or something, so my French book of choice in that category is a little bit different. This is Victor Hugo's Le Dernier Jour, Condamné, The Last Day of a Condemned Man. It's slim, it's quite easily written, and the plot is in the title. It narrates the thoughts of a man that is condemned to death and his last days and what he's thinking about. To me, this still counts as exciting because I wanted to get to the end of it and see what his last thoughts were, and at the same time I didn't, and I don't know, I was curious what was gonna happen. So heavy topic, very easy to get through though. I definitely recommend this book if you're just getting into reading in French. And just as a little, I guess, philosophical tangent of this point, I think as readers we have to come to terms with the fact that we're not going to read the same kinds of books in every language. And I get it, it's very frustrating to not be able to read maybe as fast as you're used to or as complex a book as you're used to, especially if you're into the classics and you've trained yourself to get through long books, difficult books, old books, and you've really trained that muscle and you know how rewarding it can be. But then you learn a different language and you simply cannot have those same expectations. In fact, in a way, you're starting over with your reading muscles in every language that you learn. I don't know, that just really helped me to not expect too much of myself. I was basically like, okay, I'm a baby learning French, and that's how much I should expect of myself. And tip number 5 would be to get bilingual copies. A bilingual edition is a book where you have the original language on one side, usually the left side, and then your mother tongue or a language you understand really well on the right side. I have in my recent video talked about The Flowers of Evil, Les Fleurs du Mal by Charles Baudelaire. This is a bilingual copy, and there's a little bit of splitting hairs for me with bilingual copies. I'm usually actually not a big fan of them, and I'll tell you why. If I have a bilingual copy of a novel, I just don't know which side I should read. Right? I get really overwhelmed because I want to get into the flow of reading, and then I just don't feel like jumping back and forth all the time. It's also not always a perfect symmetry, so you kind of have to check where that sentence started. It's like, again, it gets me out of the flow, and it always leaves me feeling a little bit scattered, and honestly I just don't do that anymore. With poetry, on the other hand, I feel like it works really well. Poems are usually just a few lines, maybe max a page, and they all stand for themselves. So what I did with this copy of The Flowers of Evil is I read all the English poems, and then whenever I liked one, I also read the French one. Also with poetry, it's just easier to convince myself to sit down and read a small handful of poems in the original French without looking at the translation first. That's so much more doable to me, much less of a hurdle than reading a novel or an entire chapter in French without knowing what it is about. So those are my tips. Honestly, you could combine all of them, right? Get an exciting short book that you already know in a bilingual copy and listen to it in an audiobook version. But whatever you do, I think at the end of the day, reading in a foreign language is all about taking small bites that you can actually enjoy and building up your confidence in a way that is still protecting that joy of reading and that admiration and love you have for the language that you're learning. So that's what keeps me going. Those are my tips. If you have any that I didn't share in this video, please leave them in the comments below. It would be so cool to crowdsource all of our best tips down there. And I'll link some of the videos in which I speak French or talk about French literature and my French literature course in the description box down below, in case you are, like me, specifically interested in French literature. If you're enjoying this content and you want to contribute to keeping this channel afloat, I always link my Ko-fi account, or you can also press the thanks button below the YouTube video. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye bye.